Hello and welcome to Criminal Record, the Daily Record's weekly crime show. My name is Angus Hyde and I'm joined by Norman Silvester, crime reporter with the Daily Record. Norman, how are we doing?
Very well, thank you.
We're back at it today and we're looking at some of the latest dramatic developments in the world of crime. We'll kick it off with the big news, Norman, regarding the gang war that has raged across Scotland and beyond. A wee bit behind that, a feud between former Union Bears capo turned gangland hood Ross McGill and Edinburgh cocaine kingpin Mark Richardson has seen 84 separate incidents, including numerous firebombings, machete assaults and even 2 murders in Spain. We've now had a big update from Police Scotland, who say that the feud has come to an end after numerous arrests and a resolution of differences between rivals. They say the gang war is over, Norman. How big is this?
It's a big story, but I think news of the gang war being over is probably greatly exaggerated. I think there's still a lot of criminality that could come out of all this, but basically to give a kind of a summary of the information, the Chief Constable Joe Farrell submitted a report to the Scottish Police Authority, which is a kind of oversight body for Police Scotland. And in it, she provided details of the Operation Portalage, which was a police investigation into organised crime, in particular a violent feud between 2 crime factions from about March of last year into this year, really in the last 16 months or so. And this violence involved, as we've detailed in the Daily Record before, firebombings, machete attacks, and it appears to have been instigated by a Ross McGill, an associate of the Langs family, and the target was members of the rival Daniel family and associates of the Daniel family, including Mark Richardson, who you mentioned earlier, and associates and his associates. So there's a major police investigation. There's been 64 arrests, you said 84 separate incidents. We've seen quite a few criminal trials in the last 15 months arising out of that investigation, with many criminal figures being given quite lengthy jail terms of 8 and 9 years, quite substantial prison sentences. The bigger story here is that the violence we've seen in the last sort of 15, 16 months or so is linked to a longer term feud between the Langs and Daniel crime families, and that dates back more than 25 years. What the police appear to be saying is that the shorter term feud that can be instigated between McGill and Richardson and their various associates, and with the members of the Daniel family being targeted, that this feud or dispute appears to have been brought to an end. To use the term that the police use, a resolution of differences between the two sort of organised, or between various organised crime groups. So I don't think we've seen, it's not the end of gangland violence in Glasgow. It's not necessarily an end to the Langs and Daniel feud that's been going on for more than 25 years now. But it would seem to be an end to this violence, almost a feud or dispute within a dispute between factions associated to McGill and factions associated to Richardson. Amidst all this, we had the brutal murder assassination of Eddie Langs Jr. and Ross Monaghan in a bar in Fengarolo in June last year. The police have always been at pains to point out that that particular murder wasn't in any, or double murder wasn't in any way linked to the Operation Portalage, which was looking at the more immediate violence, machete attacks and firebombings in Glasgow and Edinburgh. But obviously it was part of a wider story. We've also reported the fact that Stephen Lyons himself was arrested in Bali, deported to Amsterdam or Holland, and subsequently extradited last month to Spain. So there's a lot of different factions to this, elements to this, but what I think we have seen is the impact of the police investigation, Operation Portalage, targeting this violence we've seen in the past 15 months. It's brought a lot of criminal figures to justice at different levels in the sort of criminal tree, and it certainly seemed to have brought an end to that particular spate of violence. The 2 elements were involved in the dispute seem to have settled the differences, but whether this leads to an end of gangland violence generally, we'll have to see.
Yeah, these things tend to be kind of on a knife edge usually when it comes to feuds, especially when you consider the likes of one party still in prison. Things can change. How long do you think, looking back, like how long do these things usually hold for?
My own view is, in covering it, the Lyons Daniel feud is one that I'm not sure will ever end. It's been going on for so long now, and there's so many different kind of violent incidents. We've had elements of both families have been murdered. I think we've seen more localised dispute, which has been played out in Edinburgh and Glasgow between two different factions linked to Ross McGill and Mark Richardson. I think we've seen an end to that particular spate of violence. Most of the machete attacks and firebombings were between March and September last year, which is alluded to in the Chief Constable's report. There was a bit of a resurgence in January and February this year, but really the police have put a bit of a lid in it. There's been other little kind of incidents, with attacks on properties, but by and large, Operation Portslade has been very successful putting a lid on this violence and bringing a lot of people to justice. And I mean, I think we're talking about 64 arrests, so that's quite a lot of people taken out out of organised crime, albeit they'll be operating at different levels. But I don't think we've seen the end of the gangland violence. We spoke today to Graham Pearson, former Director General of the Scottish Crime and Drug Enforcement Agency, and he congratulated Police Scotland, also the National Crime Agency, who have been involved in other bodies on their work. But he thinks it's important that police are not complacent. He doesn't think they will be. He thinks that, probably as we speak, there'll be people involved in organised crime in Scotland, plotting their next moves. And it would be naive to think that this is the end of the violence.
Of course. And looking at violence on our streets, sadly, leads us to this tragic story. Last week, 2 teenagers were cleared of the murder of 15-year-old Amen Teckley, who was stabbed to death last year in a street in Glasgow. Now, this case has highlighted the problems we have in this country with knife crime. The record has reported that children as young as 11 are being caught by police with knives, as well as the rise of Joe gangs in Glasgow in the area where Amen lived. Tell us a wee bit more about that, Norman.
Yeah, again, a terrible tragedy of Amen Teckley, the murder of Amen Teckley, the death of Amen Teckley. As you said, 2 teenagers cleared of his murder last week. Amen was attacked in the street in the West End of Glasgow in March last year and stabbed through the chest. And sadly, these incidents are all too common. We've seen the murder of Caden Moy and other teenagers over the years, all at the hands of knife gangs or people carrying knives. And what we've been kind of highlighting is this kind of plague, almost like, of knife carrying. It always seems to be kind of routine for a lot of the teenage gangs. And of course, the argument is if you're carrying a knife, there's every chance that you use it. So we focused on a report last year that, as you said, children as young as 11 have been caught with knives during these kind of routine stops and searches by police. The number of under 18s in possession of knives has risen by 59% in the last year. That's 2024 to 2025. There's been 145 cases of teenagers stopped by police with knives last year compared to 91 in 2024. And that's where police are using their powers of stop and search to routine stop kids. They're catching with knives. Obviously, there's a preventative element to that. In the Scottish Police Federation, feel that the police need more powers in this respect. It's a preventative measure. If they're routinely and randomly stopping kids, maybe not knives for the innocent kids, but they're picking up on the children that are carrying knives, that they might use them in the future. We also reported on the kind of this new type of teenage gangs called drill gangs, and it relates to a type of ultra-violent hip-hop music that the teenagers listen to. And there's quite a few of these types of gangs operating in Glasgow at the moment, and not just in Glasgow, and in the area where Scots and Knightswood area where Amen Teckley lived. And the suggestion he may even have been targeted by these kind of drill gangs, who are basically groups of kids who are carrying weapons, including knives, going about massed, targeting other gangs. It's quite a territorial thing, but we know that Amen might have been targeted even before then, threatened by these gangs. So basically, what it has highlighted is something that's not new in many respects.
Definitely not in Glasgow.
Glasgow is the culture of knife carrying. Though there have been a lot of successful initiatives over the years by police to reduce that, it looks so that the problem hasn't really gone away.
We're really sad because we're seeing young lives taken away.
So many young lives ruined and families left grieving.
Yeah, and looking at that, the first responders, often police, we've reported a rising number of cops being diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. What's the latest on that? Because that is pretty concerning.
Yeah, we've highlighted again that, you know, the Police Federation, who are the representative body for rank and file police officers, have spoken quite a lot in the past about the growing numbers of police officers off work with mental health problems. The role of the police officers changed in recent years from the kind of stereotype of Dick Dixon of Dock Green, you know, the constable plodding the beat and, you know, being a kind of local community cop. There's so much asked of the police now. There's so many different things demanded of them that, you know, the pressure's increasing all the time. And what we highlighted was some new figures that show that the number of working days lost to post-traumatic stress disorder, that's police officers gone off with PTSD as a diagnosis, doubled from 3,313 days lost in 2023 to 6,863 in 2025. And the number of police officers who were absent from work with PTSD rose, almost doubled from 36 to 60. So that's quite a lot, 60 cops off last year with PTSD. The PTSD can be triggered by experience or witnessing a terrifying, life-threatening or traumatic event. The police officers are really witnessing this every day. And we spoke to a former police inspector, Ryan MacDonald, who's based up in Tayside, and he took early retirement last year with PTSD. And he made quite a good comment. He says, during my career in policing, I attended countless traumatic incidents, including murders, fatal fires, sudden deaths, and incidents involving children. And we tend to accept that's part of the police officer's job. He says officers see between 300 and 400 traumatic incidents in their career, where members of the public maybe only see 2 or 3. And I think we don't always remember the kind of day-to-day trauma that police officers may face, a death of a child or some horrific road accident. And what we're asking, I think the message is what we're asking of the police officers is we're asking more and more every year as the job gets more complex. And I think the message is, certainly for people like Ryan MacDonald, is Police Scotland, not just Police Scotland, but, you know, as a society, we need to do more to help these officers.
Yeah, and we see that combined with the amount of overtime that we're seeing with police officers. They're really getting stretched.
Yeah, we're seeing that all the time, you know, the growing levels of public disorder, street demonstrations, you know, crime is up. You know, we even talk about things like Operation Portalage. That's taken away a lot of resources. A lot of work will have gone into that, you know, a lot of overtime. A lot of officers are when overtime was a thing that they look forward to, making extra money. Nowadays, it's more or less compulsory now to have to do overtime. And we've spoken to a lot of officers who, of all ranks, who accumulate quite a lot of days off. They've been called in on their days off for all sorts of manner of things. I say we're seeing all these kind of street protests and demonstrations on various issues, child safety issues, and demonstrations outside migrant hotels. So that's all adding to the kind of workload of police officers. And we've spoken quite often to David Kennedy, who's General Secretary of the Scottish Police Federation. The term that he often uses to describe police officers as being burst. You know, that they're asked to do so much, so they almost kind of, it's too much, you know, for officers, and they're not getting a time to reset, take days off before they go back to work.
Yeah, because looking at that rising crimes, we're seeing a rising number of crimes taking place on a new platform, which is, of course, TikTok, only kind of come out in the last 10 years. Big thing for younger Scots and younger people in general. What's happening there?
Well, TikTok, I mean, we all use different social media platforms. I'm more of a Facebook man. That's been around about 20 years now. A lot of people prefer X. There's Instagram as well. A lot of celebrities use Instagram to post information, make information available to their fans or whoever. But TikTok's definitely one with the younger, well, what we sort of probably the teenagers, people in their 20s. And what's happening is that TikTok itself, the platform's becoming a vehicle for crime. It's not TikTok's fault. They're not endorsing it. They're trying. We'll come back to what their reaction is. But a lot of crimes that are being committed have what's called as a TikTok marker. So when the police are investigating it, they're marking TikTok's flagging up as being involved, the actual platform or site in one way. So one figure showed that there was 121 crime reports in 2023 relating to the site. That rose to 304 last year, which is a 150% increase. Most of the crimes being reported are what are called community and public order offences. That can be breach of the peace, threats, harassment, that kind of thing. So what a lot of people are doing are posting, abusive threats, maybe on TikTok, harassing people on TikTok, maybe posting unsuitable or distressing photographs of individuals on TikTok, and obviously it's been targeted. For example, we had 627 crimes report mentioning TikTok in the past 3 years. So that's it's not a massive amount, but it shows how one particular platform can be exploited by people committing crime. I say there's no suggestion it's necessarily organised crime, but low-level stuff where people are being threatened or intimidated, harassed, and that platform is being used. We spoke to TikTok about that. They're very much on board and working with the police to prevent it. But obviously, people use the site. I think posting photographs or just can be one, or posting information which can be quite distressing or abusive. It could be threats, harassment, or even a breach of the peace. But what we're seeing is when the information put in the police computer, that marker of TikTok's appearing more and more often.
Another modern obstacle for officers trying to...
The other thing I was going to mention there, we were talking earlier about the crime violence, organised crime violence. A lot of the fire raising, the fire raising attacks, the fire bombings, video footage has been posted on TikTok. So a lot of the gangs of individuals have been carrying out these attacks. These firebombing attacks were referred to earlier.
Yes.
A lot of the incidents have been the videos have been posted on TikTok. So again,
Tamil Junto, very, very active.
The organised crime group linked to all this violence. They've been posting a lot of videos from almost day one of the violence of the fire raising. The classic example was the very start of this in about mid-March. There was a hairdressing salon set on fire in Leith, and that footage appeared, obviously taken with a camera phone, I assume, on TikTok within a few hours.
Of course, and something that police officers are going to have to really get their heads around as they go into this modern era of policing. So sticking on the subject of police officers, looking at it from a different point now, there are concerns from a women's group about the number of police officers who are convicted of sexual assaults on women. What are these women saying, and what are the police saying?
Yeah, this really in the last year or so, there's been probably about half a dozen incidents of police officers being convicted of sexual assaults, domestic violence against women, which they've obviously been lost their jobs, or subject to disciplinary proceedings. In some cases, have been sent to prison. We highlighted a case of one police officer was found guilty at Hamilton Sheriff Court earlier this month of subjecting a former girlfriend to a 5-year campaign of abuse, and he's currently awaiting sentence. There was also earlier this month a pretty horrifying case of a police sergeant, Cameron Ross, from the from the Stornoway area, was found guilty at the High Court in Edinburgh of raping 2 women and waging a campaign of domestic abuse against a third, and he received 10 years imprisonment. We also highlighted a couple of other cases, and we spoke to Dawn Brennan, CEO of the women's safety charity Wise Women, and she feels that the police need to do more to identify these kind of individuals within the force. And the justice system needs to do more to root these kind of individuals out. We are seeing in the case of Cameron Roth, it's quite a substantial prison sentence. It's a relatively small number of police officers, but obviously it's concerning when the police have got very high profile campaigns against domestic violence and abuse against women.
Especially in the wake of the just horrific case of Wayne Couzens.
The Sarah Everard, go back to Sarah Everard. I mean, it's a relatively small number, but it's certainly last year that we highlighted the Daily Record a couple of days ago. that there's been some fairly high-profile incidents, some kind of serious abuse. We spoke to Police Scotland about that, and their reaction was, that it's quite right. They be held to high standards of scrutiny. They're saying these attacks go against everything the organisation stands for, and they're continuing to work with women and survivors to make sure that these incidents are kept to a minimum, and those women who do complain, do come forward, are listened to, and actions taken.
Yeah, in our last episode, we revealed that former gangster turned author Paul Ferris had a second movie coming out. He's now revealed that there's a third in the pipeline, another big screen depiction for the former Glasgow gangster.
Yeah, I mean, we've run about Paul Ferris many times in the record over the decades, and never mind over the years. We've got a quick rerun. Paul came to public attention. Paul Ferris, 1992, stood trial at the High Court in Glasgow. It was the longest criminal trial in Scottish criminal history. He was charged with the murder of Arthur Thompson Jr., who was the son then of Glasgow crime boss Arthur Thompson Sr. He was cleared unanimously by a jury of that murder, the attempted murder of Arthur Thompson Sr. and various other crimes, including drugs crimes. It was quite a sensational trial, came to public attention. He was cleared without a stain on his character, found unanimously not guilty of all the charges. But he then came back to the attention of the police, and he was arrested in the late 1990s, about 96, 97, in the Mayfair area of London, and arrested on firearms charges, which he got a 10-year sentence for, on which it was reduced to 7 years on appeal. But what he's talking about, he made the first movie where he was played by Martin Compson. He was then talking about the second movie, which will tell about basically his life after his acquittal on the murder charge, through to his arrest and conviction for the firearms, and then coming to the end of his prison sentence. What the third movie will be about, his battle to go straight once he comes out of prison, try to throw that kind of criminal past behind him. He tries to talk about how he tries to become a legitimate businessman, how he beats a lot of obstacles, and of course we know that he's become a successful author as well. 5 books, 4 about his life of crime, or former life of crime, and I think one was a novel. But the interesting thing is, in the interview, he was talking about, I asked him, when was the eureka moment when you realised the game was up? You had to put your life of crime behind you. And he was saying that it was after his arrest on the firearms charges in London. He was sitting in his prison cell, and his lawyer came to see him, and he gave him lots of information as part of his defence. And it was then he realised that during his arrest, he'd been under surveillance, not by the police, by the securities services, particularly MI5.
Well, yeah.
And of course, you realise then there's one thing maybe having a bit of local dispute with your local police, but when the government's chasing after you, when they're investigating you, and he told you quite a humorous story about, he saw all the surveillance pictures that had been taken by MI5, and it's one that showed him with a ball patch. It was so detailed, and he didn't even realise he had a ball patch. It's a slightly humorous story, but there's also a realisation that the net was closing in, and I think that was Eureka moment, and that's what he's talking about in this interview, and that'll be kind of reflected in the second and third movie. The fact that you had to make this change, that he was, I think the words he used, you can't fight the government. You maybe have a fight with the police, but you can't have a fight with the government. And I think he kind of realised the game was up, and that will be the subject of the third movie. But once he gets out of prison, try to go straight. He said he came across a lot of obstacles. A lot of people didn't believe that he wanted to go straight, but he'll be telling that story in that journey.
Yeah, of course, and we'll keep our eyes out for that
when it comes out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, especially seeing that kind of transformation from live crime into going straight.
Normal, going straight, going. Well, in fact, that will be the third movie. Will be called Going Straight.
Oh, there we go.
So there we go.
So moving on, Daily Record highlighted the case of John Linton, whose murder 30 years ago remains unsolved. The police say they're still interested in solving it. What chances are there of getting justice for the family after all this time?
Yeah, this was a case we reported on the weekend. Basically, John Linton was a campaigner from the kind of Craigend, Easterhouse area of Glasgow. He had been involved in crime as a younger man, but was latterly been dedicating his life or dedicating his time to campaigning for Thomas T.C. Campbell and Joe Steele. Now, they were both, again, names will be familiar to Daily Record readers, they were both men convicted in 1984 of the murders of 6 members of the Doyle family, which was part of the ice cream wars of that era.
Yeah.
The Doyles, innocent members of attempts by organised crime groups to take over lucrative ice cream van, grocery van runs in the kind of housing estates of Glasgow. And the Doyles, in particular Andrew Doyle, who ran a van, was targeted. The house was set on fire and the 6 members were killed in the fire. Campbell and Steele were both found guilty of murder later that year, both given life sentences. They'd always played their innocence, and he was basically campaigning at that time and having a fair bit of success on bringing their plight to the public attention, or their claims of miscarriage of justice to public attention. Joe Steele had carried out quite a number of escapes, high-profile escapes. Yeah. T.C. Campbell had been on quite a high-profile hunger strike. So there was a lot of talk, a lot of interest in it. This was 1996, April 1996. Is at a bar in the kind of Garthamlock area of Glasgow. He's standing outside and he's shot dead. And his body found the following day by a guy on his way home from night shift. It's always been a bit of a murder mystery. Was the murder due to his involvement in the campaign to free Campbell and Steele? Was he getting too near to the truth? Were the people who were really involved not wanting that truth to come out? Or could it have been something completely different? Maybe he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. We don't really know. It's always been a bit of a mystery. The motive's always been unclear. And we spoke to Police Scotland about it, and basically they were saying that, it didn't matter how many years have passed, that they're still committed to getting justice for the families, and if any new information comes to light, they'll investigate it. The reality might be that after 30 years, that whoever was responsible, whoever may have been involved, may be dead by now, may have just passed away with it, or the people who may have information or witnesses, they themselves may no longer be with us. But, the police say that these cases are never closed, and that they're always open to reinvestigating them.
Of course, and that case absolutely shook Glasgow at the time, and said that hopefully this aftermath police can get down to something.
I mean, we don't know we do know, it was quite well publicised, that Campbell and Steele were released from prison in 2004. A fresh appeal against conviction was upheld, and they were both released. T.C. Campbell's passed away, Joe Steele's still alive. We don't know if that case will ever be reinvestigated. It's unlikely. But the John Linton case, nobody's ever been charged or brought to trial. And that's one that still remains probably one of the city's most baffling unsolved murders.
And we hope that justice can be served for the family, of course. So thank you very much. We'll take that to the end.
Thank you very much, Angus.
Thank you. If we have a question for the team, you can email reporters@dailyrecord.co.uk with the subject line Criminal Records. We'll be back next time. In the meantime, you can subscribe and listen to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts by searching for Criminal Records, or you can watch it each week on our YouTube channel. Thank you. I think